They laughed at him in front of his wife, then regretted it instantly. The restaurant was packed that night. The warm glow of the lights created a cozy atmosphere, and the sound of conversations blended with the clinking of glasses and silverware. Sitting at a quiet table in the corner, Michael just wanted to enjoy a peaceful dinner with his wife, Emma. But fate, or perhaps human cruelty, had other plans. It all started when a group of men walked into the restaurant. They laughed loudly, as if they wanted the whole world to know they had arrived. Dressed in expensive suits, wearing flashy watches, they carried themselves with an air of arrogance. Among them was Ryan, a former college classmate of Michael's, though never exactly a friend. Well, look who it is. If it isn't Michael, the loser from college. Ryan's voice cut through the restaurant's chatter. Michael looked up, trying to ignore it, but it was too late. The entire group was already approaching, laughing like hyenas, ready to feast on their prey. "Michael, I thought you would have learned something after college, but it looks like you're still the same pathetic nobody," Ryan mocked, slapping Michael's back in an exaggerated way. Emma squeezed her husband's hand under the table. She could tell something was wrong, but she didn't fully understand the situation yet. "And this must be your wife." Ryan turned to Emma with a fake smile. "I feel sorry for you, sweetheart. It must be tough being married to someone so insignificant." The group erupted in laughter. Some people in the restaurant began to take notice, but no one stepped in. Michael felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't a violent man, nor one for confrontations, but the humiliation burned like fire. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and forced himself to stay calm. If only they knew who he really was. But for now he remained silent. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. The laughter echoed through the restaurant. Satisfied with his little display of dominance, Ryan patted Michael's shoulder one last time before walking away, still laughing. Emma looked at her husband, her eyes filled with something more than just concern. There was pride in them. She knew something those men didn't, and very soon they would regret every single word. Michael sat in silence as the laughter faded into the background. He could still feel the weight of Ryan's hand on his shoulder, but more than that, he could feel something deeper, a memory stirring, a part of himself he had long kept buried. Emma reached for his hand. "Michael," she said softly, her eyes searching his, "why didn't you say anything?" He forced a small smile, shaking his head. "Because people like them, they only see what they want to see." But they didn't know his story. Years ago, there was a time when Michael wasn't just some guy sitting quietly in a restaurant, ignoring insults. Back in college, he had been one of the most promising students in his class. Unlike Ryan and his group, who came from wealthy families and got by on connections, Michael had fought for everything. He worked late nights at a gas station to afford his tuition, often going without sleep to keep up with his studies. And yet, no matter how hard he worked, Ryan and his friends never let him forget that he was different. "You're wasting your time, man," Ryan had sneered at him once, leaning back in his leather chair during a lecture. "No matter how smart you are, guys like you don't make it." Michael had ignored him. He always ignored him. Until one night. Michael was walking back from work when he saw Ryan and his friends outside a bar, harassing a young waitress. She looked terrified, clutching her tray as Ryan cornered her against the wall. Michael didn't think twice. "Hey!" he called out, stepping forward. "Leave her alone." Ryan turned, eyes flashing with amusement. "Nerd, and what are you going to do about it, college boy?" Michael could still remember what happened next as if it were yesterday. The way Ryan took a drunken swing at him, the way he instinctively dodged, the way he landed a single, perfectly placed punch that sent Ryan crashing to the ground. Ryan never forgot that moment. And Michael? Michael never mentioned it again. Back to the present. As Emma squeezed his hand, he could see the understanding in her eyes. She had heard the story before, but she also knew the part he never said out loud, that Michael had been training in self-defense for years, not just for protection, but as a way to discipline his mind and body. Ryan had no idea, but soon he would remember. Michael and Emma finished their meal in silence. The echoes of laughter from Ryan and his friends still lingered in the air, but Michael didn't flinch. He had mastered the art of restraint. He had learned long ago that true strength isn't about reacting, it's about knowing when to act. But Emma saw it. She always did. As they left the restaurant and walked toward their car, she finally spoke. "You're angry." Michael exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel before even starting the engine. "Not angry," he murmured, "just tired." Emma crossed her arms, tilting her head. "Michael, I know you. You let them humiliate you back there, but I also know you had a reason." "What is it?" Emma asked. He looked at her, his jaw tightening. "Because people like Ryan thrive on power, and when you strip it away from them, they fall apart." Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. "So you're waiting?" Michael turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. His eyes were steady. "I'm waiting because," he knew one thing for certain, men like Ryan always go too far, and when they do, they expose themselves. Back inside the restaurant, Ryan was still basking in his moment of triumph, laughing with his friends over expensive drinks. "Man, did you see his face?" one of them chuckled. "It's like he wanted to crawl under the table." Ryan smirked. "That's what happens when you never learn your place." But deep down, beneath all the arrogance, something felt off. Michael's silence had unsettled him. It wasn't fear, it wasn't submission, it was something else, something Ryan couldn't quite place. And that nagging feeling would only grow stronger, because the next time he crossed paths with Michael, the tables would turn. For the next few days, Michael carried on as if nothing had happened. He went to work, spent time with Emma, and kept his routine intact. But behind his calm demeanor, something had shifted. He wasn't plotting revenge. He didn't need to. Ryan would be the one to bring about his own downfall. Michael just had to wait. It happened on a Friday evening. Michael had just finished a meeting downtown and was walking to his car when he heard a familiar voice. No, listen. This is a misunderstanding. I'll get you the money, I swear." Michael turned the corner, and there he was, Ryan. But this time, he wasn't laughing. He was cornered in an alleyway by two men in dark suits, their expressions cold, their stance menacing. "You had a deadline, Ryan," one of them said, his voice calm but firm, "and you missed it." Michael observed from a distance, the pieces falling into place. Ryan was in trouble, and not just any trouble, serious trouble. The men weren't just ordinary debt collectors. They were the kind you don't walk away from unless they let you. Ryan tried to regain his usual arrogance. "Come on, it's just a delay. You know I always pay up." One of the men chuckled, shaking his head. "Not this time." Michael saw it before Ryan did. The man reaching inside his jacket, a gun. For a split second, Michael considered walking away, letting Ryan deal with the consequences of his own arrogance. But something inside him wouldn't let him, because no matter what Ryan had done, Michael wasn't like him. Before the man could pull the gun, Michael moved. A single step forward, a shift in weight, a precise motion. In seconds, he was there. One strike to the wrist, one move to disarm, one fluid motion that sent the gun sliding across the pavement. The two men barely had time to react before Michael stood between them and Ryan. "You had a deadline, Ryan," one of them said, his voice calm but firm, "and you missed it." Michael observed from a distance, the pieces falling into place. Ryan was in trouble, and not just any trouble. Serious trouble. The men weren't just ordinary debt collectors. They were the kind you don't walk away from unless they let you. Ryan tried to regain his usual arrogance. "Come on, it's just a delay. You know I always pay up." One of the men chuckled, shaking his head. Not this time. Michael saw it before Ryan did, the man reaching inside his jacket. A gun. For a split second, Michael considered walking away, letting Ryan deal with the consequences of his own arrogance. But something inside him wouldn't let him, because no matter what Ryan had done, Michael wasn't like him. Before the man could pull the gun, Michael moved. A single step forward, a shift in weight, a precise motion. In seconds, he was there. One strike to the wrist, one move to disarm, one fluid motion that sent the gun sliding across the pavement. The two men barely had time to react before Michael stood between them and Ryan. Michael tilted his head slightly, his expression calm. Sure you did. The weight of the moment settled between them. The arrogance that had defined Ryan was gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty. For years, Ryan had thought he was the one on top, the one with power, the one who could humiliate Michael without consequence. But now he saw the truth. Michael wasn't weak. He wasn't a failure. He had simply chosen to walk a different path. Ryan had mistaken Michael's silence for submission, but in reality it was control, and that realization shook him to his core. Ryan swallowed hard, trying to salvage what was left of his pride. Look, I appreciate it, he said, his voice quieter than usual, but let's not make this a big deal, all right? Michael studied him for a long moment, then he did something Ryan didn't expect. He smiled, not a smug smile, not a victorious one, just a knowing smile. Don't worry. Michael said, I won't tell anyone. The words hit Ryan harder than any punch ever could, because Michael wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't interested in humiliating Ryan the way he had been humiliated, and somehow that made it worse. Ryan had spent his whole life believing that power came from stepping on others, but Michael had real power, because he didn't need to prove it to anyone. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time he had nothing to say. Michael turned and walked away, and Ryan was left standing in the dark, knowing he would never laugh at Michael again. Ryan stood frozen in the alleyway, watching Michael disappear into the night. His heart was still pounding, but not from fear of the men who had threatened him. It was from something far worse. Realization. For years, he had built his world on the illusion that he was untouchable, that his money, his connections, and his arrogance made him superior. But in just a few moments, Michael had shattered that illusion without even trying. Ryan had spent years humiliating him, and yet Michael had saved him without asking for anything, without even holding it over his head. It was almost unbearable. As Ryan walked back toward the street, his mind was racing. He needed to re-establish control, to feel like himself again. But when he pulled out his phone, there were over a dozen missed calls. His stomach twisted. He dialed back, and a voice answered almost immediately. Ryan, what the hell is going on? It was his business partner. Investors are pulling out. The board is demanding answers, and now I'm hearing rumors that you're in serious debt. Ryan felt the ground shift beneath him. No, I just had a little setback. A setback? The voice snapped. You don't get it, do you? Your reputation is crumbling. You think people haven't noticed how reckless you've been, how much money you've burned through. This isn't just business anymore, Ryan. People are turning against you. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the call cut off. His hands clenched into fists. This couldn't be happening. Everything was slipping through his fingers. His money, his status, his power. And at the center of it all, one truth stood out in his mind. Michael had won, without ever needing revenge. Michael arrived home, greeted by Emma's warm smile. Everything okay? She asked, sensing something had happened. Michael hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just an old chapter finally closing. She studied his face, understanding more than he said. You didn't fight him, did you? Michael shook his head. No, I didn't need to. Emma smiled knowingly. That's because you already won. Michael didn't respond, but deep down he knew she was right. Ryan had spent his whole life fighting for dominance, but Michael had learned that true strength didn't come from beating others. It came from knowing when to walk away. And in the end, that was the lesson Ryan would never forget. Days passed, then weeks. Michael barely thought about Ryan after that night. For him, the matter was over. He had no interest in revenge, no need to prove anything. He had his life, his peace, and that was enough. But for Ryan, things were different. The humiliation he had inflicted on others for years had finally come full circle. His business crumbled, his so-called friends vanished the moment he was no longer useful. The power he once held over people was gone, and worst of all, he had no one to blame but himself. One evening, Michael and Emma were having coffee at their favorite cafe when a familiar figure hesitated near their table. It was Ryan, but he wasn't the same man from before. His usual arrogance was gone. He looked tired, humbled, even lost. For a moment he just stood there, then, clearing his throat, he slowly approached. Michael set his cup down and met his eyes. Ryan swallowed hard. He looked like he wanted to say something, but struggled to find the words. Finally he exhaled. "I owe you an apology." Michael didn't say anything, letting Ryan continue. "I was a fool," Ryan admitted, his voice lower than usual. "I spent my whole life trying to tear others down, just to feel important. And in the end, I was the one who lost everything." Michael studied him for a moment, then asked the only question that mattered. "And what did you learn?" Ryan hesitated, then gave a small, bitter chuckle. "That power doesn't come from stepping on people," he said. "It comes from being someone worth respecting." Michael nodded. Finally he understood. Ryan looked down, then back up at him. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say it." Michael set his cup down and met his eyes. Ryan swallowed hard. He looked like he wanted to say something, but struggled to find the words. Finally he exhaled. "I owe you an apology." Michael didn't say anything, letting Ryan continue. "I was a fool," Ryan admitted, his voice lower than usual. "I spent my whole life trying to tear others down, just to feel important, and in the end, I was the one who lost everything." Michael studied him for a moment, then asked the only question that mattered. "And what did you learn?" Ryan hesitated, then gave a small, bitter chuckle. "That power doesn't come from stepping on people," he said. "It comes from being someone worth respecting." Michael nodded. Finally he understood. Ryan looked down, then back up at him. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say it." Michael thought for a moment, then simply said, "Good." Ryan nodded once, then turned to leave. And as he walked away, Michael didn't feel triumph. He felt peace, because true victory isn't in crushing your enemies, it's in proving you never need to.